Please re-listen the video several times to learn the vocabulary properly. Trek. A long, adventurous journey. They embarked on a 5-day trek in the mountains. Canopy. The upper layer of trees in a forest. The forest's canopy was thick, shading the ground below. Summit. The highest point of a mountain or hill. Reaching the summit, they enjoyed panoramic views. Terrain. The landscape, especially considered in terms of its physical features. The rough terrain made hiking challenging. Marsh. A wetland area, often flooded and rich in plant life. They spotted rare birds while walking through the marsh. Tundra. A cold, treeless area, often with frozen subsoil. The Arctic tundra was both beautiful and desolate. Cove. A small, sheltered bay. They discovered a secluded cove perfect for swimming. Fjord. A long, deep, narrow inlet of the sea between high cliffs. The fjords were a breathtaking sight from the boat. Mesa. An isolated flat-topped hill with steep sides. The mesa dominated the desert landscape. Gorge. A narrow valley between hills or mountains. The river cut through the landscape, creating a dramatic gorge. Ridge. A long, narrow elevated land formation. They walked along the mountain ridge at dawn. Delta. A landform at the mouth of a river. The river's delta was teeming with wildlife. Prairie. A large open area of grassland. The prairie stretched out for miles under the open sky. Oasis. A fertile spot in a desert. The travelers found an oasis with a water spring. Glacier. A slowly moving mass of ice. They marveled at the glacier's immense size. Atoll. A ring-shaped coral reef or island. The atoll's clear waters were perfect for snorkeling. Archipelago. A group of islands. The archipelago was known for its stunning beaches. Butte. An isolated hill with steep sides and a flat top. The butte stood out in the vast desert landscape. Savanna. A grassy plain in tropical and subtropical regions. Elephants roamed the vast savanna. Estuary. The tidal mouth of a large river. The estuary was a haven for diverse bird species. Plateau. A flat, elevated landform. The plateau offered a stunning view of the valley below. Foliage. Plant leaves, collectively. The hiking trail was surrounded by lush foliage. Ravine. A deep, narrow gorge with steep sides. A stream flowed at the bottom of the ravine. Knoll. A small hill or mound. We rested on a grassy knoll to enjoy the view. Dune. A mound or ridge of sand formed by the wind. The desert was dotted with large sand dunes. Taiga. The sometimes swampy coniferous forest of high northern latitudes. The taiga was home to many wildlife species. Bayou. A marshy outlet of a lake or river. They explored the bayou in a small boat. Chaparral. Vegetation consisting chiefly of tangled shrubs and thorny bushes. The chaparral covered the landscape in a dense brush. Hillock. A small hill or mound. Sheep grazed on the green hillock beside the farm. Geyser. A hot spring in which water intermittently boils. The geyser erupted, shooting water high into the air. Lagoon. A shallow body of water separated from a larger body of water. The turquoise lagoon was perfect for swimming. Moor. An open area of uncultivated land. The moor was covered with heather and moss. Creek. A small stream or brook. They followed the creek as it wound through the forest. Bluff. A steep cliff or bank. The eagle's nest was perched high on the bluff. Steppe. A large area of flat unforested grassland. The steppe stretched out endlessly under the wide sky. Fen. A low and marshy or frequently flooded area of land. Rare birds nested in the secluded fen. Crater. A large, bowl-shaped cavity in the ground. The volcanic crater was a sight to behold. Copse. A small group of trees. They found shade under a copse of oak trees. Thicket. A dense group of bushes or trees. A deer emerged from the thicket nearby. Brook. A small, natural stream of fresh water. The gentle brook flowed through the meadow. Reef. A ridge of jagged rock, coral, or sand just above or below the surface of the sea. They went snorkeling along the vibrant coral reef. Gulch. A narrow and steep-sided ravine marking the course of a fast stream. The hikers navigated the rocky gulch carefully. Heath. An area of open uncultivated land, especially in Britain, with characteristic vegetation of heather, gorse, and coarse grasses. They walked across the windswept heath in the countryside. Loch. A lake or a sea inlet, especially when regarded as picturesque or as bordered by steep mountains, in Scotland. They visited a famous loch known for its legendary monster. Pampas. Extensive, treeless plains in South America. The pampas were vast and filled with tall grasses. Tarn. A small mountain lake, especially one formed by glaciers. The clear waters of the Tarn reflected the surrounding mountains. Vale. A valley, used in place names or as a poetic term. They descended into the green vale below the mountains. Body. A valley, ravine, or channel that is dry except in the rainy season, in the desert. They came across a dry wadi while exploring the desert. Barren. A land too poor to produce much or any vegetation. The barren landscape stretched out, offering no shade. Cay. A small, low-elevation, sandy island on the surface of a coral reef. The tiny cay was a perfect spot for a day trip. Mangrove. Tropical trees that grow in swampy ground along coastal areas. The mangrove forest was teeming with diverse wildlife. Silt. Fine sand, clay, or other material carried by running water and deposited as sediment. After the flood, the fields were covered in silt. Scree. A mass of small loose stones that form or cover a slope on a mountain. Climbing the scree slope required careful footing. Serac. A pinnacle or ridge of ice on the surface of a glacier. The glacier's surface was broken by imposing seracs. Shoal. A shallow place in a body of water. The fish swam in large numbers over the sandy shoal. Siesta. A short nap taken in the early afternoon, often a part of the lifestyle in hot countries. After lunch, they enjoyed a siesta under the shade of a tree. Solstice. The time when the sun reaches its highest or lowest point in the sky at noon, marked by the longest and shortest days. They celebrated the summer solstice with a night hike. Sound. A large sea or ocean inlet larger than a bay. They sailed through the sound, enjoying the scenic views. Spit. A narrow point of land projecting into the sea. They walked to the end of the spit to watch the waves. Squall. A sudden, sharp increase in wind speed. The boat rocked as a squall passed over the lake. Bramble. A prickly scrambling vine or shrub. They picked blackberries from the brambles along the path. Butte. An isolated hill with steep, often vertical sides and a small, relatively flat top. The butte stood prominently in the desert landscape. Crevasse. A deep open crack, especially one in a glacier. Mountaineers must be wary of hidden crevasses. Dune. A mound or ridge of sand formed by the wind, typically in a desert or near a beach. They climbed the tall dune to see the ocean. Fjord. A long, narrow, deep inlet of the sea between high cliffs. They marveled at the steep cliffs lining the fjord. Geyser. A hot spring in which water intermittently boils, sending a tall column of water and steam into the air. The geyser erupted, spraying water high into the sky. Glacier. A slowly moving mass or river of ice. The glacier's ancient ice flowed through the valley. Grove. A small wood, orchard, or group of trees. They picnicked in a shady grove of oaks. Islet. A small island. The boat anchored near a sandy islet. Lagoon. A shallow body of water separated from a larger body of water by barrier islands or reefs. The tranquil lagoon was perfect for snorkeling. Marsh. A wetland area, often inundated with water. They spotted rare birds in the marsh. Meadow. A field with wild grass and flowers. They had a picnic in the sunny meadow. Mesa. A flat-topped hill with steep sides, common in the southwestern U.S. The mesa dominated the desert landscape. Oasis. A fertile spot in a desert where water is found. The oasis was a welcome sight in the vast desert. Peninsula. A piece of land almost surrounded by water. They explored the scenic peninsula on foot. Plateau. A flat, elevated area of land. The plateau offered extensive views of the surrounding area. Prairie. A large, open area of grassland, especially in North America. They drove through miles of untouched prairie. Rapids. A fast-flowing and turbulent part of a river. They navigated the rapids with skill. Reef. A ridge of jagged rock, coral, or sand just above or below the sea's surface. They snorkeled around the colorful coral reef. Ridge. A long narrow hilltop, mountain range, or watershed. They hiked along the windy ridge at dawn. Estuary. The tidal mouth of a large river, where the tide meets the stream. They explored the rich biodiversity of the estuary. Foothill. A low hill at the base of a mountain or mountain range. They started their hike at the foothills of the mountains. Hamlet. A small settlement, smaller than a village. They passed through a quaint hamlet on their countryside walk. Iceberg. A large floating mass of ice detached from a glacier. The ship navigated carefully around the iceberg. Jetty. A landing stage or small pier at which boats can dock or be moored. They fished off the end of the old jetty. Moorland. A type of habitat characterized by high-altitude open country covered mainly with grass, heather, or bracken. The moorland stretched vast and unbroken under the sky. Outcrop. A visible exposure of bedrock or ancient superficial deposits on the surface of the earth. The rocky outcrop was a perfect place to rest and enjoy the view. Quarry. A large, deep pit from which stone or other materials have been extracted. The old quarry had filled with water over the years, creating a lake. Rill. A small brook or river stream. They listened to the gentle flow of the rill as they hiked. Tundra. A vast, flat, treeless Arctic region in which the subsoil is permanently frozen. The tundra was both desolate and strikingly beautiful. Badlands. Extensive tracts of heavily eroded, uncultivable land with little vegetation. They explored the rugged terrain of the Badlands. Basin. A natural depression on the Earth's surface, typically containing water. The river flowed into a wide basin. Bay. A broad inlet of the sea where the land curves inward. They sailed into a serene bay. Canyon. A deep gorge, typically one with a river flowing through it. The canyon was known for its dramatic rock formations. Cavern. A large cave or a chamber in a cave. They descended into the dark cavern. Clifftop. The top of a steep cliff, typically at the edge of the sea. They stood on the clifftop, watching the waves below. Copse. A small group of trees. The deer was hidden in the copse. Cove. A small sheltered bay. They discovered a secluded cove perfect for swimming. Delta. A landform at the mouth of a river, where it flows into another body of water. The river's delta was rich with wildlife and vegetation. Dune. A mound or ridge of sand formed by the wind. The sand dunes shifted shape with the wind. Fjord. A long, narrow, deep inlet of the sea between high cliffs, especially in Norway and New Zealand. They kayaked through the serene fjord. Glade. An open space in a forest. They came across a beautiful glade filled with wildflowers. Hillock. A small hill or mound. The children played on the grassy hillock. Inlet. A small arm of the sea, a lake, or a river. The boat sailed into a secluded inlet. Bowl. A small, natural hill. We picnicked on top of the grassy knoll. Ledge. A narrow, flat projection from a cliff or other vertical surface. The birds nested on the rocky ledge. Moraine. A mass of rocks and sediment carried down and deposited by a glacier. The glacier left behind a large moraine. Oasis. A fertile spot in a desert where water is found. The oasis was a welcome sight in the vast desert. Peak. The pointed top of a mountain. They reached the peak just in time to watch the sunrise. Plateau. An area of relatively level high ground. The plateau offered a panoramic view of the surrounding area. Ravine. A deep, narrow gorge with steep sides. The trail wound its way down the steep ravine. Reservoir. A large natural or artificial lake used as a source of water supply. They camped near the tranquil reservoir. Ridge. A long narrow hilltop, mountain range, or watershed. They hiked along the ridge overlooking the valley. Riverbed. The bottom of a river channel. The dry riverbed was strewn with smooth stones. Shoal. A shallow place in a body of water. The fisherman navigated his boat carefully through the shoal. Slope. Land that tends to rise or fall at an angle. They skied down the snowy slope. Strait. A narrow passage of water connecting two seas or two large areas of water. They sailed through the strait as the sun set. Thicket. A dense group of bushes or trees. A variety of birds nested in the thick thicket. Tributary. A river or stream flowing into a larger river or lake. They followed the tributary upstream. Valley. A low area of land between hills or mountains. The valley was lush and green in the summer. Archipelago. A group of islands. They sailed around the picturesque archipelago. Basin. A natural depression in the surface of the land, often with a lake at the bottom of it. The basin was surrounded by mountains. Cape. A point of land that sticks out into water, much like a peninsula. They hiked to the end of the cape to see the lighthouse. Divide. A ridge of land that separates waters flowing to different rivers. The Continental Divide is a significant geological feature. Fjord. A long, narrow, deep inlet of the sea between high cliffs. The fjord's crystal-clear waters were stunning. Gulf. A large inlet from the ocean into the landmass. They enjoyed the warm waters of the Gulf. Isthmus. A narrow strip of land with sea on either side, forming a link between two larger areas of land. The isthmus offered beautiful views on both sides. Marshland. A type of wetland that is dominated by herbaceous rather than woody plant species. The marshland was a habitat for many bird species. Oasis. A fertile spot in a desert where water is found. The oasis appeared like a mirage in the desert. Peninsula. A piece of land almost surrounded by water or projecting out into a body of water. They visited a remote village on the peninsula. Atoll. A ring-shaped reef, island, or chain of islands formed of coral. They snorkeled around the beautiful atoll. Bluff. A steep cliff, bank, or promontory. The eagle nested on the high bluff overlooking the valley. Chasm. A deep fissure in the Earth's surface. The bridge spanned a daunting chasm. Delta. A landform where a river meets a larger body of water, depositing sediments. The river's delta was teeming with wildlife. Escarpment. A long, steep slope, especially one at the edge of a plateau. The escarpment offered stunning views of the landscape. Gorge. A narrow valley between hills or mountains, often with a river running through it. They rafted through the winding gorge. Inlet. A small arm of the sea, a lake, or a river. The secluded inlet was perfect for fishing. Lagoon. A shallow body of water separated from a larger body of water by barrier islands or reefs. They swam in the warm waters of the lagoon. Moor. A tract of open, peaty, wasteland, often overgrown with heath. The moor was shrouded in mist in the early morning. Narrows. A narrow part of a strait, river, or other waterways. The boat navigated through the narrows with ease. Alcove. A small recessed section of a room or an opening in a cliff face. They found a shaded alcove to rest during their hike. Barren. Land too poor to produce much or any vegetation. The barren landscape stretched under the blazing sun. Creek. A small stream or minor tributary of a river. Children were playing by the babbling creek. Foothills. Low hills at the base of a mountain or mountain range. The village was nestled in the foothills of the mountains. Headland. A narrow piece of land that projects from a coastline into the sea. The headland offered breathtaking views of the coast. Island. An area of high or mountainous land. They trekked across the remote highland terrain. Lowland. Land that is at, near, or below the level of the sea. The lowland areas were known for their fertile soil. Plateau. An area of relatively level high ground. The plateau was dotted with wildflowers in spring. Ravine. A deep, narrow gorge with steep sides. A stream trickled through the bottom of the ravine. Tundra. A vast, flat, treeless Arctic region where the subsoil is permanently frozen. They ventured into the stark beauty of the tundra. Basin. A natural depression on the Earth's surface typically containing water. The basin in the valley collected rainwater. Cove. A small sheltered bay along the coast. They discovered a secluded cove perfect for swimming. Dune. A mound or ridge of sand formed by the wind. The desert landscape was dominated by shifting sand dunes. Estuary. The tidal mouth of a large river, where the tide meets the river. The estuary was bustling with a variety of bird species. Fjord. A long, narrow, deep inlet of the sea between high cliffs. The cruise through the fjord was breathtaking. Glade. An open space in a forest. Deer were often seen in the forest glade. Harbor. A place on the coast where vessels may find shelter. The fishing boats returned to the safety of the harbor. Island. A piece of land surrounded by water. They spent a week on a remote, uninhabited island. Jungle. A dense, tropical forest. The jungle teemed with a symphony of animal sounds. Lagoon. A shallow stretch of water separated from the sea by a low sandbank or coral reef. The tropical lagoon was ideal for snorkeling. Knoll. A small hill or mound. They sat atop the grassy knoll to watch the sunset. Loch. A lake or a sea inlet, especially in Scotland. They kayaked across the serene loch. Mesa. An isolated flat-topped hill with steep sides. The mesa stood prominently in the desert landscape. Oasis. A fertile spot in a desert where water is found. The oasis was a welcome sight amidst the sand dunes. Pinnacle. A high, pointed piece of rock. Climbers aimed for the pinnacle of the Rocky Mountain. Quagmire. A soft boggy area of land. They carefully navigated the marshy quagmire. Ridge. A long, narrow hilltop, mountain range, or watershed. The trail ran along a steep ridge offering spectacular views. Summit. The highest point of a hill or mountain. They celebrated reaching the summit with a breathtaking panorama. Terrace. A level paved area or platform next to a building. Or a flat area created on a hillside. They admired the rice terraces carved into the hillside. Valley. A low area of land between hills or mountains, often with a river or stream running through it. The valley was lush with wildflowers and streams. Butte. An isolated hill with steep, often vertical sides and a small, relatively flat top. The butte stood out prominently against the flat landscape. Caldera. A large volcanic crater. They hiked around the rim of the ancient caldera. Delta. A landform where a river meets a larger body of water, depositing sediments. The river's delta was rich with wildlife and vegetation. Geyser. A hot spring in which water intermittently boils, sending a tall column of water and steam into the air. The geyser erupted, spraying water high into the sky. Hillock. A small hill or mound. The children played on the grassy hillock near the river. Islet. A small island. They rowed out to a tiny islet just offshore. Moraine. A mass of rocks and sediment carried down and deposited by a glacier. The glacial moraine was strewn with boulders. Plateau. A flat, elevated area of land. The plateau offered extensive views of the surrounding area. Ravine. A deep, narrow gorge with steep sides. A stream trickled through the bottom of the ravine. Tundra. A vast, flat, treeless Arctic region in which the subsoil is permanently frozen. The tundra was both desolate and strikingly beautiful. Archipelago. A group of islands. They explored the remote archipelago by boat. Bayou. A marshy outlet of a lake or river, typically in the southeastern United States. They kayaked through the peaceful bayou. Canyon. A deep gorge, typically one with a river flowing through it. The canyon walls towered high above the river. Escarpment. A long, steep slope, especially at the edge of a plateau or separating areas of land at different heights. They admired the vast landscape from the top of the escarpment. Fjord. A long, narrow, deep inlet of the sea between high cliffs, as in Norway and Iceland. The fjord was flanked by towering cliffs. Glacier. A slowly moving mass of ice. They marveled at the glacier's blue hues. Highland. An area of high or mountainous land. The highland region was known for its breathtaking scenery. Isthmus. A narrow strip of land with sea on either side, forming a link between two larger areas of land. The isthmus offered spectacular views of both seas. Lagoon. A shallow body of water separated from a larger body of water by barrier islands or reefs. The turquoise lagoon was perfect for swimming. Mesa. An isolated flat-topped hill with steep sides. The mesa rose dramatically from the surrounding plain. Atoll. A ring-shaped reef, island, or chain of islands formed of coral. They snorkeled around the vibrant atoll. Copse. A small group of trees. The deer was hidden in the dense copse. Dune. A mound or ridge of sand formed by the wind. The sand dunes looked golden in the sunset. Estuary. The tidal mouth of a large river, where the tide meets the stream. They observed diverse bird species in the estuary. Gulch. A narrow and steep-sided ravine marking the course of a fast stream. The hikers navigated the rocky gulch carefully. Mole. A small hill or mound. They rested on the grassy knoll during their hike. Loch. A lake or a sea inlet, especially in Scotland. The mysterious loch was rumored to have a monster. Moor. An area of open, uncultivated land with heather and peat. The moor was shrouded in mist in the early morning. Oasis. A fertile spot in a desert where water is found. The oasis was a lush haven in the desert landscape. Plateau. An area of